the House Democrats, what they released today. This is a tranche of new photos. And we should note there's a lot that we don't know about the context of these photos. And it's not part of the FOIA files. But since you have done so much reporting on Jeffrey Epstein's emails and this tranche of documents, I'm just curious about your take on this.
Sure. So, these are part of the cache of records that Jeffrey Epstein's estate has been compelled via subpoena to turn over to the House Oversight Committee. So we saw emails last month, right? There was significant coverage around some emails that mentioned Trump, Larry Summers, and other public, high-profile public individuals. So now we have some photographs, and these photos show Epstein with some pictures with Trump. There's photos with Steve Bannon and Woody Allen, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Bill Clinton. So these are the people that were in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit. We have already known that. That's details that have been previously known. There's a lack of context here, though, right? So the photos, we don't really know exactly, what was happening, or what they were discussing. I haven't seen any dates around them, but it's just more evidence, if you will, about the powerful people that surrounded Jeffrey Epstein. And this is coming just about a week before the deadline from the Justice Department to turn over the Epstein files. December 19th is the 30 days, that 30-day deadline that's up, where they're gonna, we'll find out whether they're gonna release anything.
Well, that's a really good segue to the latest FOIA Files newsletter, because it's all about what the FBI and DOJ hid in the Epstein Files review. Talk a little bit about the FOIA lawsuit and what you found that the FBI withheld.
Sure. So I'm going to try to pack this into a nice little tight nugget here. So when
sorry,
we're almost approaching a year when the Justice Department said that they would declassify everything that they had on Jeffrey Epstein. Pam Bondi had this rollout in February where she announced the first phase of the Epstein files, handed out some binders that we'd learn later were previously released documents. I wanted to find out what was going on behind the scenes after the directive was handed to FBI Director Kash Patel related to the processing of these records. And so I asked for internal FBI emails, materials that they used to train 934 FBI agents and other personnel who worked on this Epstein Files project. It was called internally, I found out from these emails, the Special Redaction Project. And what I received are a cache of 60 emails that kind of gave us the first look into what was happening behind the scenes. What I found very interesting through this, ultimately this FOIA lawsuit that Bloomberg and I filed, was what they didn't turn over. And what they didn't turn over consisted of some, these PowerPoint training materials. They described how they were redacting some of these records. There was a video on training. Then there were records related to an internal investigation into the FBI. Personnel who weren't complying, apparently, allegedly, with the order to process, these Epstein files. We know now that they're just based on these documents that there were electronic devices that's part of the evidence that they were, as they were reviewing the records this year, that they were scrutinizing. Could have been desktop computers, it could have been laptops, cameras, cell phones. Curiously, there is a reference in in my newsletter, and it came in a court document, and this is a declaration from the FBI's head of the FOIA office there. When they were looking for records to turn over to me that were responsive to what I had requested, they said that they searched client lists. That's it. They just said they searched client lists to see if there were any responsive records.
So, Jason,
yeah.
Does this raise more than answer questions? Raise more questions versus answer more questions? Yeah.
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions. And my case as it relates to just getting these documents is ongoing. But the point I want to make in highlighting all of this is, there's a lot of secrecy. There's been a lot of secrecy revolving around what happened behind the scenes, right? Earlier this year, before the Justice Department decided and the FBI not to release anything. So, these records and what I wrote in the newsletter today, what my hope is that it chips away a bit at that secrecy and provides the public with some insight into what was happening behind the scenes, how the FBI was conducting its work. As I mentioned, there were 934 FBI personnel who were tasked with reviewing the Epstein files. The FBI paid $851,000 in overtime for just 1 week's worth. 1 week's worth of work on the Epstein files. So there's a lot of taxpayer dollars being spent here as well.
I also thought it was fascinating that there were training videos. Is that normal in a process like this?
This process, I think this is what's important here, is that this process in and of itself is not normal. It's highly unusual, right? Yeah. The fact that they gathered 934 people to do this is very unique. So they needed to train them on how to redact records, what to look for.
One of the things, Jason, and I got to say, Tim and I really look forward to these chats. And, a lot of what we've been talking about is Epstein. And, I was just jotting some notes, being in someone's orbit or in their black book or their plane manifesto or part of a birthday card book or seen in a photo doesn't necessarily mean you've done anything wrong. But the longer you work on this, and then go to the big, deep dive about looking at kind of the financial ties that Jeffrey Epstein had, that it's much broader than everybody thought. Can we make the assumption where there's smoke, there's fire, or we still don't know, but there's a lot of stuff that keeps coming at Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. So it depends on what you mean, like what that fire would be. There were lots of people in his orbit. And what's become very apparent to us is that even after Jeffrey Epstein was charged, even after he pled guilty to a state charge in Florida, sex crimes charge, it appeared not to be of great concern to those he surrounded himself with, particularly as we reported earlier this week, financial executives on Wall Street, and these emails that we've obtained, what it does is it provides new details, about Epstein as an advisor, as an investor, how he leveraged his influence on Wall Street, and how they, in this case, hedge funds sought him out. What was happening publicly was not of a great concern.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And look, to be fair, we can't characterize everybody reached out to in the piece, but some have said, the relationship was strictly professional, and relationship ended in 2007. Yes. Before we let you go, and if you want, our listeners or viewers, if you want more, this was a Bloomberg exclusive just 2 days ago that we're referring to, that Jason, along with a team that also included Max Abelson, Harry Wilson, Jeff Cow, Surya Matu as well. Bloomberg exclusive, a great piece about the financial orbit of Jeffrey Epstein. Are we learning finally where his money came from?
Great question. I mean, we're not, the emails don't answer it, but we're getting close. We're getting really close. And I think that is where we want to be right now in terms of, what we're looking into, what we're going to continue to look into is the source of that wealth.